Mesechas Círoבין, Perek Shlishi, Mishnah Beis. Before starting Mishnah Beis, let me add a little onto the previous Mishnah, Mishnah Aleph. In the conclusion of Mishnah Aleph, we learnt that Rabbi Yehuda said that a Kohen can leave his Eruv even in a Beis HaKavoros, whereas the Tanna Kama disagrees that a Kohen would be forbidden to leave the Eruv Techumin in the Beis HaKavoros. The Gemara explains that the machlokus between Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachomim, it refers not only to a Kohen, but even to a Yisrael. That is, the Tanna Kama is of the opinion that even a Yisrael cannot leave his Eruv in a Beis HaKavoros. The reason being that although Eruv Techumin is a mitzvah, and mitzvahs lav lehonos nitnu, and that mitzvahs are not, any benefit derived from a mitzvah is not considered to be a benefit, and therefore, although it's forbidden to have anor from a Beis HaKavoros, the benefit which is derived from doing the mitzvah, that is not considered to be a benefit. Nonetheless, after he has completed his Eruv Techumin, he gets some benefit insofar that a person is nichola, he is happy that the Eruv should be left guarded in the Beis HaKavoros even when he no longer needs the Eruv. And therefore that is subsequently a benefit when there's no mitzvah. And for that the Chachomim say you're not allowed to leave your Eruv in the Beis HaKavoros because you're getting a benefit after the mitzvah is already over. Whereas Rabbi Yehuda says that benefit we can discard. The benefit which you get, person doesn't care whether the Eruv is guarded in the Beis HaKavoros after he has finished using it for the purposes of the Eruv. The whole reason for leaving it in the Beis HaKavoros was for the purposes of Eruv. That is not considered to be a benefit because mitzvahs lav lehonos nitnu. Any benefit subsequently derived, we can discard such a benefit because a person is not particular that his Eruv should be guarded after the Eruv is already fulfilled its purpose. Mishnah Beis. The Mishnah continues, Ma'arvin b'demai. The Mishnah lists various cases where something has been something is invalid, but it's not sufficiently invalid to invalidate the Eruv in total. Bidmai, that is the produce of an Am Ha'oretz, one has to take Maser because one cannot be sure that they've taken Trumas and Masers. But nonetheless, if one is permitted to utilize the demai for the purposes of the Eruv, he's not allowed to eat the produce until you've taken Trumas and Masers. So in many cases we find bidmai hekilu, and in particular here because the Gemara brings a svara migal, since he could make himself into an oni, and an oni is allowed to eat demai without taking Trumas and Masers. There were makel in various cases. So therefore, even an osher, even though in his present state he's forbidden to have the demai, but potentially, however remote that potential is, he could eat the demai, and therefore we could use that produce for the purposes of an Eruv. Uba Maser Rishon shenitlo trumosei, Maser Rishon from which trumo has been taken. Uba Maser Sheni v'hegdish sheniftu, and Maser Sheni and hegdish which has been redeemed. Again, at face value, there would seem to be no chidush here, because once the truma has been taken and once the Maser Sheni and the hegdish has been redeemed, then it's 100% chulin, it's 100% okay. So why should there be any havamina that it should not be valid for an Eruv? So the Gemara explains, no, Maser Rishon shenitlo trumosei, we're talking about a case where the Truma Gedola was not taken at all. That is, the Levi was hiktim b'shibolim. He took the Maser Rishon at the very early stage, before the Chi of Truma arose, and thereby the Gemara learns out from a posuk that there's no subsequent Chiyuv to take Truma Gedola whatsoever, and therefore even though Truma Gedola has not been taken, since the Maser Rishon was taken before the Zman Chiyuv for Truma Gedola, therefore it's Heter Gomor. And similarly, Maser Sheni v'hegdish sheniftu, the Gemara says, where he failed to add a chomesh. When you redeem Maser Sheni and hegdish, you have to add a chomesh, a fifth on top. The chiddush of the Mishnah is that yes, he didn't conform with the mitzvah of adding a chomesh, but that does not invalidate the pidyon, and it is considered to be chulin gomor. It's chulin gomor, but he didn't do the mitzvah of adding a chomesh, and therefore there's no reason why we should passel the food for the purposes of the Eruv. And Mishnah continues, "Va'kohanim b'chalo uvatrumo," and kohanim can use for the Eruv chalo and trumo. B'pashtus, there is no particular chidush here. We just mention it in order to contrast with the case of Yisrael. Avalo b'tevel v'lo b'maser rishon shelo nitro trumosai. Tevel, even though a kohen will ultimately, when the truma is taken from this produce, the kohen will be allowed to eat all the produce. But even a kohen is forbidden to eat tevel. Tevel means produce from which the truma has not yet been taken, even though it's obviously the produce is going to go to the kohen, but nonetheless, as long as the truma has not been taken, it's forbidden for the kohen to partake of this tevel. Therefore, since it is forbidden to eat, it cannot be used for the eruv. V'lo b'maser rishon shelo nitlo trumosa. Here we're talking about a case where the truma gedola was not taken, and he took maser rishon. The Levi took maser rishon, but the maser rishon was taken after the time came when the chiyuv for truma gedola arose. Unlike the ratio of the Mishnah, where he took the maser rishon before the zaman chiyuv of truma, and therefore in such a case it still has a din of tevel because truma has not been taken, and for that reason the produce cannot be used for the purposes of eruv. V'lo b'maser sheni v'hekdesh shelo niftu, and again the Gemara points out if it's shelo niftu, well, clearly it's forbidden. So the Gemara says, no, there was a pidyon, but the pidyon was done in an invalid way altogether. That is, instead of using a coin which has a tzura, a minted coin, they used a coin like an asimon, which is just a token coin which doesn't have a face, and it doesn't have the tzura, an image on top, and therefore it's not a valid coin whatsoever, which invalidates the pidyon, and therefore if the pidyon is invalid, it still retains the kedushas maser sheni, the kedusha of hekdesh. It's not ro'oi le'achilo, and therefore the eruv is invalid. Mishnah continues, Hasholeach eruvei biad cheresh shotave cotton. One who sends his eruv in the hands of a cheresh shotave cotton, a deaf mute, a shota, someone who hasn't got das, the cotton under minor, obiyad misha ena omoda bo eruv, or in the hand of someone who doesn't admit to the whole principle of Eruv, is kofa be'eruv, denies the whole principle of Eruv, then clearly this person cannot be considered to have carried out the shalichus, and even if he did so, he has no das to make an Eruv, eno Eruv, there is no Eruv, the Eruv is totally invalid. If he handed it over to one of these people, cheresh shotave cotton, and instructed somebody else to collect it from that particular person, hareza eruv, provided that he's omed roeu, provided he sees the transfer that taking place between the cheresh shotave cotton and the other party, then we can assume that the other party has carried out his shlichus, even though he didn't actually see the other party actually place the eruv in position, but nonetheless, in a dovo drabonon, the halacha is chazoko shliach osa shlichusa. There is a chazoko that where a shliach will carry out his shlichus in a din drabonon. In a din diraisa, we say there's no such chazoko. You cannot be sure that the shliach has carried out his shlichus. But in a midi drabonon, something which is drabonon, and the eruv is drabonon, we can assume that the shliach carried out his shlichus, and therefore it is sufficient as long as we see that the cheresh shotave cotton has handed it over to another party. That party has received the eruv, then we can assume that other party will carry out the instructions and place the eruv in the correct position, even though he received it only from the hands of someone who's got no das or someone who doesn't believe in the eruv. Nonetheless, the eruv would be valid. That completes Mishnah.